a confident athlete is a successful athlete, and it's the exact same thing for an actor. A confident actor is a successful actor, because if you are afraid to make a mistake, or when you make a mistake, that's all that you can focus on, it limits your performance. I watch it in my basketball players. If they're afraid of making a mistake, they won't take those chances that we need them to take, like make that pass or take that open shot or whatever the case is. And with actors, if you're too afraid to perform and be creative with a choice that you feel very strongly about because you want to play it safe, because you're trying to second guess what the casting director or what the director wants, it's not going to work.
All right, awesome. Today, I am joined by Casting Director Michelle Lewitt. I am super excited for this one. Michelle, how are you doing? And thank you for joining me.
Oh, I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. It's been interesting through all of the circumstances of the past year with things shutting down and whatnot, this sort of digital way of connecting with other humans. I think we're finding ways to make that work more and more. And I'm just grateful that we have this kind of a platform so that I can still, share my experiences and connect with others and maybe help and answer questions. So I'm very grateful. So thanks for asking me here.
No, absolutely. I think you're totally right. 5-6 years ago, we might not have been able to do this kind of stuff to this level. And for me, I mean, it's crazy. I'm looking at the calendar. It's almost a year since I was doing these and started doing it with casting people. And it's gone real quick, but gone real slow at the same time.
Yeah, it's strange, isn't it? It's like this time conundrum where time, like, it means nothing, but it also is very structured. And it's like, wow, it's been a year. Wait, has it been a year? Yeah, it's so strange. It's very surreal. I think it's been humbling for all of us to sort of let go of the attachment and the construct of time, which I have found benefit from, even though it was a little painful in the beginning, to change and pivot from that,
In what way? Professionally, personally, both?
All of it, where, it feels like, when you're going against a deadline, but yet, let's say agents and managers are not responding to you in the same amount of time because they're dealing with their own stuff on that. They had to pivot and try and operate at home without their assistants, one room away and all that kind of stuff. And then even personally, I have 2 sons, and they hadn't been in school. They just 2 weeks ago, went back to an abbreviated schedule at live school, but they've been doing distance learning at home for about a year, and just adjusting to having them here at home when I, not only for my work purposes, but I was used to having a little bit of time to decompress and breathe or meditate or whatever. And now I have these, I love them. I'm very fortunate. My little dudes are awesome and cool and very easy, but still having those 2 energies around when I was used to having, sort of time to myself to recharge. It's just been it's been an adjustment professionally and personally, I think, for all of us. But I think ultimately we have all grown in some way from it, it's sort of exciting. And so then when the world, as we slowly start getting back out there, I think it's going to be very interesting to see who's evolved in what way, and new connections we might have, or old connections that may have dissipated because it just didn't align. So it's pretty interesting times, both personally and professionally.
Yeah, it's almost like there's been a merging of the two in many ways as well. And so you kind of then start looking at it's so corny, but it's like, what's the priority? And we always know that like family and your close inner circle should always, in theory, be the number one. Doesn't always happen that way in sort of the rat race of life. But I think that's a thing, right? Like the idea of the rat race and the chase has its merit, but also what were we doing before that might have been a bit outdated and not giving enough to the other side? And how can, when we come back, still give focus to one, but also not neglect the other and have a bit of harmony? And I think that's the shift.
I've definitely seen a resurgence in self-care and having to take care of ourselves in order to perform on any level as a human, whether that be as a mother, a father, a daughter, a son, a brother, a sister, a mentor, a friend. We sort of have to take care of ourselves first, so that, because, you know, the old adage, you can't pour from an empty cup. I mean, I certainly have found that was a humbling experience at the beginning of the pandemic.
Yeah, because we'll try to pour from that empty cup for a while.
for sure.
Absolutely. And I think it's sort of interesting as a segue, I guess, from that into how that maybe translates from a performance and acting perspective, right? Because people are going to listen to this and go, great, guys, talk about the acting stuff now, get into it. So right. Let's transition to that a little bit with a bit of a segue from that. I mean, before we get into the technicalities of Zoom and distance auditions and self-tapes and all that good stuff, just that human side of what we've gone through and how that's going to impact people from a performance perspective and just how they move through the world. Like, do you have any initial hot takes on how you maybe see that maybe changing for certain creatives, if at all?
Yes. Yeah, I do. And I feel that there are sort of two ends of that spectrum. If there is a bit of a neglect in that self-care, it could impact a performance by if you're exhausted, and that doesn't just mean physically, but perhaps emotionally or mentally, you're not going to be able to perform at your optimal level, right? Because you're just too drained and too exhausted. On the other end of that, as we're all sort of navigating, and specifically towards performers, as they navigate whatever this time has meant to them, they now will have a deeper well to draw from in terms of characters and authentic emotions going forward. You know, I firmly believe that you know, those trials and tribulations that we experience, especially when you're an artistic performer and a creative, though it can be very dark and painful to go through at times, those wounds and the healing, you get to draw from those, and it can really lend itself to a performance and to what you're able to pull from in an authentic way, as opposed to having to manufacture it because you haven't gone through anything difficult, right? So I think it can manifest itself and present itself in performance in two very different ways.
And I guess for people listening to that and going, okay, have I done that? I don't know. Sometimes that level of self-awareness, you know, is something that we can't always see implicitly, and we have to just sense it and find our way through it. Do you feel like that's part of it, sort of now, if it wasn't before, an ongoing, or what should be an ongoing practice? So, you know, we've got our acting training and our technique and going to class and all that stuff that is integral, obviously. But I always have kind of looked back and thought that there wasn't a huge amount of discussion on the sort of macro level about what you're talking to, which is the headspace, the experiences. What are you doing in life outside of just the industry that's enriching what you then bring to the craft? Do you feel like that should almost be part of the lexicon now, where it's, yes, get in a great class and study, but also if you don't do all this other stuff as a human as well and have that practice that's unique to you, something's going to not mesh?
Yeah, I do think that they go hand in hand, and it's super important. And I've had actually conversations with several of my casting colleagues about this. It really comes down to authenticity in your performance. So as long as we believe the words coming out of your mouth as a human, and that you're drawing from a real place, that is what's going to help get you onto the callback or to book the job, or whatever the process is. And yes, the technique is important and the practice is important. I mean, I use a quote all the time from one of the Navy SEALs mantras. You don't rise to the occasion, you fall to the level of your training. So it's like, if you're not training at a level that can deliver in a very real way. I mean, as I mentioned to you, I also coach basketball, right? So I use this with my players all the time, that if you're not playing at game speed during practice, what makes you think you're going to be able to do that once you get out on the court in a game against you know, an opponent? It's the same for acting, that yes, that the technique needs to be there. Even if let's say you go a week and you don't have a self-tape request, maybe you present yourself with a little self-tape challenge and whatnot. You can flex that muscle and exercise your craft even without your agent or a casting director or someone asking you to do it. So it's up to you, the accountability that you want for the level of your training. But again, exactly like you said, sometimes as casting directors, we'll watch a self-tape and it is just steeped in beautiful technique, but we lost the humanity, right? We lost the accessibility. We lost the beautiful flaws that we have as humans, because when we're communicating and when we're connecting, it is not a seamless and perfect thing. We bobble words, we look in other directions, we're human, right? And so there has to be a level of authenticity in the performance coupled with your technique, and hopefully that creates some kind of a perfect storm to really compel whoever lays eyes on that self-tape to either remember you for future projects if for whatever reason you don't match for that particular project, or to move you on to the next level.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think that that's like a self-censorship thing for some people then, when they're in that space and the technique is pristine, but they're not allowing themselves to express the humanity? Or is it just something else? Yeah.
I see it all the time. It is a scary thing to be 100% vulnerable and authentic.
Sure.
Okay. It takes a lot of courage and bravery. I'll tell a story. I've told the story a couple of times, but there's an actor by the name of Jeffrey Donovan. He's been the lead of various TV shows. He's worked with Clint Eastwood and lots of very notable directors. He's one of my favorite actors. I find him to be one of the most underrated actors out there. I believe he could win an Oscar one day. But as he was on his rise, I was fortunate enough to audition him many times and hired him a couple times actually as well. And every time he would come in and audition, he would just, and this was in the days of in-person, auditioning. I can't wait till that comes back.
What's that? What are they?
Yeah, right. Exactly. He would just knock it out of the park. I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt after auditioning him 2 or 3 times, when I would bring him in for an audition, whether or not he was perfect for the role in terms of type or look or whatnot, he would bring such an authentic, raw creativity to whatever role I was asking him to play. It blew my mind. And regardless of the genre as well, I brought him in on all kinds of different genres. So after hiring him a couple of times and getting to know him, we sort of became friends. And I had an opportunity once. It was just he and I sitting chatting. I don't even know what it was. He might have just dropped by the office to say hi to myself and Jane and Janet. But I said to him, I said, Jeffrey, can you just tell me, you're one of the actors that I know beyond a shadow of doubt that when I bring you in on an audition, you're going to knock it out of the park, regardless if you book it, regardless if any of the result oriented things. You just always knock it out of the park. Can you just tell me, like, what do you do that allows you to do that? And he said to me, he said, Michelle, he said, every single time I walk into a casting room, I expose all of my wounds. So basically anything I've ever experienced, any wound, any sort of trauma or anything like that is completely exposed. So when I walk into the room, I have this very, very thin veil, to be able to exchange pleasantries and politeness with the casting director, the director, whoever is in the room. And then once the scene starts or the audition starts, I am completely open and exposed. And so that whatever gets thrown, he acknowledges the fact that while he may have an idea of what he's going to do, a big part of acting is listening and responding, right? So whatever energy is given off by the reader that's reading with him, he is ready to just give you a raw, vulnerable expression of those wounds that he's experienced in his life. And I've never forgotten. I mean, that was literally maybe 15, 16, 17 years ago, but I have never forgotten it. And I think it really shows not only in his work, but it's a key to being able to be that consistently working actor, that you're willing to dive in that way. Because as casting directors, and I will tell you, there's a lot of intuition that goes into our craft. It's not just a very technical thing of assessing who's good, who's not, whose technique, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of intuition that goes into what we do. And we will pick up on it instantaneously if there is any kind of a wall up, or if you're only going halfway in terms of emotion and authenticity. So I just think that's a super important thing, is getting to know yourself and practicing being in the space of vulnerability, not just in the space of performing, but as a human being.
All right, now you're talking crazy, Michelle. All right, hold up now.
I know
that's going nuts.
Completely nuts.
Well, but it's linked. It goes back to the point a few moments ago where they're intertwined. But then the practice of being vulnerable in everyday life, it's more and more commonplace now, but still is so rare that you come across roadblocks and barriers and you get smacked down in your normal life, as if your acting life is some other parallel universe. And then you go into the room and you feel like, oh, well, I've been trained that when I do that in the world, I get cut down. If I do that in the audition room, there's a subconscious thing to it, I guess, is what I'm trying to badly articulate here.
Yeah, we try and protect, right? I mean, that's a natural human instinct to try and protect. Especially, I mean, in an industry like ours, it's like frequent rejection, right? I mean, it depends on how you frame it. I mean, someone said a wonderful way to reframe that is, rejection is God's protection, or what, use whatever word that makes you feel comfortable there. It doesn't have to be God, but, it's like we ask you to, in the days of live auditions, come into a room that's nothing like the environment you're going to be in, read with someone who's nothing like the person you're going to be acting opposite, and deliver something fantastic, right? It's a very inhumane, strange process. So, this is a profession that it's not for the faint of heart, and it is not for those who are not willing to be courageous in their creativity. And it's the same with self-tape, especially. It's kind of hard, right? You do a few takes and you're like, oh, which one do I send? They only want to see one take. And then you start getting in your head about it, right? So, there are so many aspects of self-awareness that I believe as a human being, long before you're ever a performer, because we're all, look, I am a human before I'm a casting director. You know what I mean? And it goes the same for performers. You're a human before you're a performer or an actor. And so it's really doing that human work in order to have it lend itself to you in your profession.
Yeah, I love that. I love the fact that, it's kind of obvious, but it's not. And just having people like yourself articulate it verbally, that then when people can watch this back, just if that tweaks with one or two and lands, that's super, powerful and important, because to your point, you could be the most gifted technical actor in the world, but at some level, everybody that comes into those rooms has the technique and talent. Otherwise they wouldn't be there. So it's not about that anymore. It's about something else. And it's about, you're talking about the ability to be vulnerable and to expose those sides of yourself, and then to let go, I guess, and have that outcome independence so that you can still live your life normally, because then it's up to the casting and producer and network gods and director gods. Don't want to leave them out.
Yeah, because that authenticity often will outshine any lack of technique. Now, please, anyone watching this, don't. No.
But it's an important thing to say.
Take that to mean that, like, don't train because your natural savoir-faire will carry you, because that's not the case. But an example I like to give is, the very first time I auditioned Channing Tatum was on a film called Friday Night Lights, and he was fresh here from Miami. I don't know that he had even booked his first little indie feature that he booked out here, but anyway, he came in. I was reading him from one of the lead roles on Friday Night Lights, and he was super new. He was a model and a dancer in Miami, and so the technique and the training was not quite there yet. However, there was an essence about him. There was an intangible thing, this charisma about him that was so interesting. And so we worked in the room for quite a bit. I was, directing and redirecting, trying to see where he could go, where he could get. Ultimately we went in a different direction, but I remembered that quality. I'm like, this something interesting about this guy, right? And then shortly after that, we were casting a Supercross film, where we needed sort of one of the supporting roles, sort of a hot shot Supercross champion, right? And immediately I said to my director, I'm like, I have your guy. I know who could pull this off, because Channing just had such a natural charisma, almost like a cocky, thing to him that would just fill up the screen. I knew it. I felt it that first audition. And we ended up hiring Channing for this little role of this, supercross hotshot kind of a guy. And then it's been really cool to watch his career evolve over the years. And, regardless of what anyone's opinion is on his range or anything like that, there is no denying that there is a presence or an it factor to him. Otherwise, he would not work as much as he does,
and
right?
People see what they see based on the roles that he's doing. It doesn't mean that that's all he does. It's the same as I'm halfway through Matthew McConaughey's Green Lights. I don't know if you've read it, but it's the same. It's the same thing.
It's on the list.
Yeah, I mean, and it's him leaving because he was rom-com guy because he wanted to be in the more dramatic stuff, and he'd only been in certain lanes, and that
I think he didn't work for like 2 years or something like that because he was so adamant about reframing what he wanted to be in the entertainment space. And I bravo to him, because look at some of his subsequent work has been spectacular.
Absolutely. And I mean, he's another one, I guess, if you read the story, that kind of came in pretty green and then just sort of honed things over time. And you're talking about Channing there as an example, and you being able to sense that, spot that early on, and sort of see that there's something. And it's that terrible thing that people hate to talk about, the it factor or whatever we label it as, because it's so unquantifiable. So I'm not going to ask you to quantify it, but when you see it, do you just know it because it's a feeling that you get, or is there something a bit more to it than that? Is it?
Sometimes it is a feeling. I mean, I'll give a converse story to that. The first time I auditioned Chris Evans, okay? Chris Evans is very clearly a very successful leading man in our business. He was very young at the time. I think he had only booked some WB show even before it was CW. And he was unprepared. He was like, it felt like the audition meant very little to him, and it showed. Right? The audition was very subpar. He left. Jane and I kind of looked at each other and we're like, what's the big deal about this guy? Right? Like we gave, I mean, the cool thing about being mentored by Jane, and I know you've had Jane on.
Yeah,
here, right?
we'll touch on that, but yeah.
Oh my God. She's very blunt and she's very honest with the reps when they ask for feedback. And so she gave very honest feedback about Chris. And so the next time he came in for us, he was prepared. He basically knocked it out of the park. Okay. And in that moment, we were able to see that quality that he had, that we all see now because he's a big movie star, right? But his first audition, his unpreparedness and his lack of work ethic overshadowed any special quality that we might have seen, because we were so put off. Because when you go into a room and you're not prepared, or you are showing signs of maybe a subpar work ethic, what in our minds we're thinking, well, we can't deliver, no matter how talented you are, we can't deliver someone with a terrible work ethic to our director, because our directors and our producers are trusting us to deliver someone who's going to do the work, and be diligent on set. So that, more so than anything, what we were thinking about Chris in that moment was, well, I mean, if he's not going to be prepared for this audition, what makes you think he's going to be, prepared on set? And, but it was so cool the next time he came in that he was prepared. He knocked it out of the park, and we were like, oh yeah, he's pretty special, So there are, it's a balance. It's a balance.
Sure.
And the first time we had a general with Chris Hemsworth, just in answering your question about is it feeling or whatever, Chris walked into our office and it was just like movie star, like it was like a no-brainer kind of. So sometimes, yes, there is that intuition. And I want to make it very clear, it's not, excuse me for a moment, my allergies. It's not about looks per se. Yes, it's lovely to have handsome or beautiful human beings, aesthetically, in terms of what society has deemed our standard of beauty. But honestly, especially within the last 5 to 10 years, I feel that's really pivoted to interesting, captivating. I'm looking for an interesting face. I'm looking for a captivating face. Who do I want to look at up on the screen for a couple of hours? And that doesn't necessarily mean the models or the, stereotypically beautiful people. I mean, look at when I was casting Transformers, if you look at Shia LaBeouf, he wasn't sort of your typical handsome kind of a young leading man kind of a guy, you know? Even Bradley Cooper, before he became a big movie star, he was sort of cast as the second banana best friend sort of person. But I think our lens as an industry in the fairly recent past, we've pivoted where it's less about being stereotypically beautiful and more about interesting, captivating looks. So I just want to make sure that that's very clear when we're talking about you know, that it factor or whatnot. Just because you don't look like, you know, Angelina Jolie or Matthew McConaughey, that's okay. You know, it's really about an energy, you know. And oh, my point was Chris Hemsworth, because yes, he is a very good looking person, but it was more about his energy than just what his face was. Because let me tell you, I've met a lot of gorgeous humans that really don't have what it takes to be, you know, a successful actor. So,
and that goes again back to the self-awareness piece and being able to open up and expose that side of yourself, regardless of the sort of physical aesthetic, but beyond that, what's going on inside, and the training that takes, and everything we spoke to about that as well. And I think it's interesting how that's pivoting, like you say, especially in the last 5 years. Here in the UK, it's the same kind of thing. I know LA has always had that thing about being all about the beautiful people, and if you don't look a certain way, and I'm sure there's still elements of that for sure, but
yep. And I think, you know, for myself and my casting colleagues, we're trying to really shift that. We actively try and think outside of the box when we're casting roles.
And then it's just about, again, that essence, that vibe, that feeling that resonates. No, I love that. And so you touched on Jane. I think we'd be remiss not to go back to Jane, who I don't know when it was now. It was sometime at the back end of last year. Like you said, time's like a bad it's a Christopher Nolan movie waiting to happen at the moment.
Exactly. Good analogy.
But she was great and super gracious, and yes, very direct, even just in the chat on Zoom with me. But how did that come to be? Because obviously you've touched on your background in basketball and as a coach, and then to transition into casting and working with Jane. How did that materialize, and what did that give you?
How did I pivot from coaching to casting? Is that the question? Okay. So I was going to college and literally majoring in athletic training and sports psychology because I wanted to be a collegiate coach. And then just through some various research and talking to people, because basketball and coaching is something so near and dear to my heart, I felt like the politics involved with collegiate coaching might be something that I wouldn't be so great at coping with, because I do have such a vested interest and am very emotionally connected to it. So I started thinking about, well, what else could I do? And I was having a conversation with my best friend at the time, and he said, you know, well, if you could do anything that you wanted, what would you do? You know, barring education, what your parents think, you know, anything else. And literally, I mean, it's still to this day, I don't know what it was. Casting director just flew out of my mouth. To this day, I don't know how, why. I didn't even really know what casting director was. So anyway, this was back before we all got on the old Google. So I went to Barnes and Noble and I got a book on casting, and I quickly, you know, educated myself and came to understand there's theater casting, there's feature film casting, there's commercial casting, there's TV, all kinds of casting. And so because, you know, I'm born and raised in LA, grew up watching movies. My mom was a film lover as well. So I was like, oh, I'm definitely a feature girl, right? So I went back to Barnes and Noble and I got a book on all the top feature film casting directors in the business. And of course, a couple that were highlighted were Jane and Janet. So I wrote, I sent cover letters all over from LA to Chicago to New York. And basically, I said, in the same way I assess the skills and talents of basketball players to assemble a successful team, I want to redirect that skill and intuition to assessing the talents of actors to assemble a successful cast. Because that's really where my strong suit is assessing talent, right? So I just wanted to pivot it to a different arena. And so I got called in on a couple of interviews, one of which was Jane and Janet. And they already had an assistant at the time, and I had obviously zero experience. And they said, well, we don't have a position for you, but if you would like to be an unpaid intern, we would welcome that. And I was like, yep. You know, I mean, I was 19 years old. I knew I just needed a foot in the door, right? So that interview was on a Friday. I showed up on Monday, ready to intern and really just learn and just absorb everything. And this is back in the day of when casting directors had filing cabinets full of hard
headshots and postcards and all
literally, and they were like, female, 30 to 35 and whatever. And so I just dove in, learning everything that I possibly could. Even when the workday was over, I would stay and just like memorize the names of the actors in the filing cabinet, so that I would start to create a Rolodex of actors' names. And I just really dove in with head first into that. And 2 weeks later, they let their assistant go, and I became their new casting assistant. And I was fortunate enough to work my way from casting assistant to casting associate to casting director to eventually the last 3 years partner with them within their company. And I'm just so grateful that Jane and Janet were generous enough to mentor me in a way where they truly just took me under their wing. And it's funny, a longtime agent and manager, Stephen Levy, he used to call me Baby Jane, because he said that I was just turning into like the miniature version of Jane, which I take as a huge compliment.
And you would, right? Like you said, you were there to learn, and you were 19, you said? So you're a sponge. You're going to take in what you're seeing, and you're like, these are two of the greats. Look at everything they've done. Like, why wouldn't you do that to sponge from them? So
exactly. And I was fortunate enough they kept me around, that I could just, really evolve there as a casting professional. And then, they started moving into retirement. I took a brief break to pop out a couple of kids. And then, when I came back, I started my own casting shingle, and have been very fortunate to, specialize sort of in the indie space more now. I did a lot of studio films back when I was with Jane and Janet. So I have the gamut of different types of casting, from big, huge films to tiny films. And I really love the indie space. I love the creativity. I love the different feel of the filmmakers making decisions with my director and producer versus making decisions with 14 studio executives.
I guess your hands are in the dirt a little bit more, and you're able to help cultivate and create.
1000%. 1000%. Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. I'd like to talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. There's someone in the waiting room, so I'm going to bring them in, because if not, they might bounce. And I want to talk about basketball as well later, but not just about the sport, but about how it translates to our industry and any kind of parallels. Because I think sports and what we do, it always, from mindset side to me, has a lot of strong overlaps.
Absolutely.
But let's bring in Liz before she disappears and thinks that I'm ignoring her. Okay. And hopefully she is still here. She is. Hey, Liz, how you doing?
Hi, how are you, Ashley?
I'm good. I'm going to shut up and give you 5 minutes to have a chat with Michelle and ask a few questions, and just use the time for you.
Great. Thanks so much.
Liz.
Hi, Michelle. How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Yeah, really well. Thank you. So I'll just jump right in, I guess. I was thinking that, self-tapes can feel very last minute to us on the actor's side of things.
When you need to do like a 24-hour turnaround or 48-hour turnaround? Yeah,
I think so. And I guess I was sort of wondering if you could talk about what it's like on your side, because I think there's obviously a huge process that happens before we get to that point. Yeah. So just to remember that you guys are people and doing all these things for us before we even get to that point.
Sure. So for me, and I'm gonna speak through the lens of feature films specifically, and indie feature films. So a TV casting director might have a different opinion or perspective. So I just want to make sure that that's understood. So for me, I like to, hold on, my son is making noise. So for me, I like to give the actors as much time as possible, right? So I really don't like doing 24 to 48 hour turnarounds on self tapes. So if I can avoid that, I will. So I usually like to give more time. But if there is a breakdown or a self-tape thing from me that is a very short turnaround, that either means I am replacing someone, or it means that I don't know, maybe it was a role that it was originally thought to be a local hire in the place that it's shooting, but now they've said no, we want it to come out of LA. You know, there's got to be an extenuate for me. There's got to be an extenuating circumstance to have to do it that quickly, because honestly, selfishly, as casting directors, we want you to do as good of a job as possible, and we know that if we don't give you time with the material and whatnot, the percentages sort of go down on the level of performance because you don't have enough time to sit with it or memorize it or whatever your process is.
Yeah.
Or even read the script. I really like making the script available if possible. I know that in TV that's a little weird because writers are a little precious and blah blah blah. But for me, I would say 95% of the projects that I do, the script is available. So I like the actors to, especially if it's a significant role, to be able to read the script so it informs their performance. So on our side, so then when the self-tapes come in, right, it's like I usually, depending on how many, if I've requested 100 self-tapes, I'm going to start watching them in batches as they come in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So in terms of timing on your end, if you're not rushing it, getting it in sooner is potentially better. Now, again, don't take that as rushing it, because I don't want your performance compromised because you're like, I need to get it in first, so if they watch the first batch, because that's not always the case. If I've only requested 15 self-tapes, I'm going to kind of wait till the deadline, everyone gets it in, and then I'll probably watch them all in one batch, right? So then, getting it in early would be irrelevant. But yeah, and then from there, I mean, look, I recently was casting a film where I needed to replace a role within 48 hours. And so what happened was I put out the self-tape request and I was watching them as they came in. And anytime it was a good one, I would send it to my director and I'm like, we should be so lucky to have this person. This person knocked it out of the park, and it kind of, the process went like that. And it was basically the first, solid audition we saw, basically we hired, right?
Wow. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And here's another thing is, if let's say an actor falls out, sometimes I won't re-release the breakdown. I'll go back to the other the self-tapes that were already submitted and look at them through new eyes. And sometimes someone will rise that for whatever reason, or a month earlier, 6 weeks earlier, didn't catch our eye, but now they do. Maybe it could be because of the other cast members that are now in place, so we have a better scope of the landscape, and now maybe your look fits in a little bit better now that we know what the other cast members look like, or there's so many variables to what goes into casting. So, but in terms of specifically the self-tape, for me, I like to give you all as much time as possible. So if there is a very short turnaround and you feel like it's kind of hurried, most of the time there has been something that has happened for us to only give you a short amount of time.
Yeah, that's so, I mean, it's so helpful to know, because I feel like quite often you can just feel so rushed to do everything. And then there's also just the ability to get it together and just do it well. That can also feel really good on our end if we're like, right, I'm ready to go. So that can feel really nice. So I'm an actor with US and UK dual citizenship. I live in London.
Which is fabulous. That's great.
So it is great. I mean, I feel really lucky to have that dual citizenship and living in London. And I now have an agent who has relationships with people in the UK and the US. Fabulous. And casting here, or I should say an actor's marketing package in the UK, is generally through one place on Spotlight, and sort of you're in one place, you have one page, and everybody goes to see that one thing. And it's much more spread out in the US. And I'm now with somebody who's representing me in the US on Actors Access, etc.
Great.
So when you source international actors or actors with dual citizenship, are you looking on the English? I mean, I would imagine you're looking on the American websites for those kinds of things, and I need to be tailoring my marketing materials to that market, even though I'm not there right now?
Yeah, I mean, it would serve you well to have a very strong package on this side
Of course,
as well.
yeah.
I mean, I mostly, it's great that you have an agent here. I mostly use Breakdown Express and Actors Access. I know
Okay.
some of my colleagues use Casting Frontier and other things. I don't know. I'm old school. I've been doing this for 21 years, and I stick to my thing.
Yeah.
But I will say, when I'm looking for international actors, I kind of know the agencies that do have international talent, and so I will reach out to them, and I will usually make a note in the breakdown, and I have enough solid rep relationships that those reps will be honest with me about who is where and what. So for, I do have relationships with the international agents in several markets, from the UK to Spain to Sweden. And occasionally I do have to reach out directly to them because I just need a wider talent pool to pull from.
Yeah.
So sometimes I will reach out to the UK agents directly. But often, especially within the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years, the international talent pool and availability based on the reps here has really grown exponentially. So chances are I'm going to get my eyes on you before I would have to reach out to your UK agent.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was sort of thinking. And then thinking about that and thinking about Actors Access specifically, and I know because things are marketed differently, does it still apply? I hope this isn't too basic a question, but does it still apply to sort of have when you've got your video reels, to sort of break things into categories, say drama and
so that's a good question. Because many casting directors have many different opinions on this.
Of course,
for me, it depends. Look, if I'm casting a very serious drama or if I'm casting a comedy, yes, it is helpful to be able to target and see, you doing that particular tone or genre. So yes, that is helpful. However, there are times, let's say you move on to a callback, or let's say your audition was really good, or let's say I'm just being educated on you in general. I'm going to look at your entire reel. It is good to have a reel that is sort of, not too long, a 2-minute reel that shows everything you can do. Because sometimes I'll just like to watch the reel, and I like to see every different character and every different tone. And it's fun to see you go from a really silly character to, oh my God, she's like in this very deep crying scene or whatever. For me personally, I always like to look at the full reel as well, because I feel like it gives me a different perspective on your entire range.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess so I have a specific skill set in that I'm also a stand-up comedian, and I do have that completely separate from my acting stuff. So then, you have a set, but in that case, that feels like an appropriate separation, I guess.
Yes, a very appropriate separation. And it's also great that it needs to be listed somewhere on your special skills or whatnot, because for me, what I have found, because I've actually hired many stand-up comedians in the theatrical space. Most recently, I hired Tom Segura to play a dramatic role in a drama, in an indie drama. So I find that stand-up comedians are really great with improv. And sometimes you need that skill set. And sometimes I have directors that really want that skill set in their actors. So that's a great special skill to have, and definitely have something queued up so that if your agent says, she also does stand-up comedy, that if the casting director says, "Ooh, do you have her stand-up stuff?" you have an instant little sample there of your stand-up stuff.
There it is.
Perfect.
Amazing.
No, it sounds like you're doing everything correctly.
Oh, well, that's good. I always wanted to be like teacher's pet.
Yeah, well, you are.
That's so good. And just one final thing, if you have time.
Yeah, sure.
This is a bit of a wider scope, but do social media followers, or say as a stand-up comedian, putting stuff out on, say, TikTok and Instagram and all those things, I am putting content out there. It's not my main focus, but rather than speaking about me personally, for you as a casting director, is this something, are you finding people through that? Is it having an influence on how you cast? Do you look at people's social media, the amount of people they have following and all that? I know it's a big question, but
No, it's a great question because it has changed and continues to change. So it's sort of an evolving topic. So, I mean, if someone had told me 10 years ago that I would even be looking at someone's social media when I consider casting, I would be like, you're crazy. But so I'll tell you from my lens and what I've experienced with some producers. So depending on the size of the film that I'm working on, there are times that my financiers or my producers will care about the amount of followers. Okay. But I don't want people to get too concerned about followers and whatnot, because it's either, sometimes it's a fluke how people get so many followers. It's not, what I mean?
Yeah.
So yes, I have had it where they look at that. Okay. So I'll be honest about that part. But in terms of when I personally look at social media or my director or producer, there's usually two reasons for it. A, we want to see what other looks like, who you really are as a human, because headshots are very deliberate, right? You present exactly what you want to present. And sometimes we'd like to see what you look like in more candid shots. Sometimes we'd like to see, that different looks. It's usually a look motivated thing.
Yeah.
Or depending on what the film is. So for example, I was recently casting a film called Karen, which had very strong social justice and social equity themes, right? So my director and I would go onto the social media of these people who were in contention, because if it was very clear that they did not have sort of an aligned mindset in terms of racial issues socially, we weren't really interested in having people like that in this particular film.
That makes
Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
So sometimes it has to do with that kind of thing, or sometimes we just like to see what else is on there. Is it the first go-to? I consider absolutely not. Is your read and your performance and your self-tape and your audition the priority? Absolutely 100%. But social media can be used just to sort of inform or fill in a few gaps. Elevate.
Elevate it a bit.
Yep.
That makes so much sense.
But I don't like actors to get too overly concerned about their social media, because you don't need to put a crazy amount of energy into it,
I think that authenticity, as with everything, just remains important. Put out the things that you like, that you think are funny.
Yes.
And the acting stuff is something separate.
Well, especially in the self-tape world, where we don't get to have you in the room and have some little conversations and find out who you are as a human and your natural personality. Social media can sometimes provide a little bit of a window of who you are outside of that audition, which has been a piece that's been missing in the self-tape process.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks. Great question.
Oh, good. Yeah. Well, have a great rest of the time, you guys.
Awesome. Thanks, Liz.
You too.
I just bought 50,000 followers after that.
Yeah.
It's a good idea.
No, it's not. It's a terrible one. See you later.
See you later, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, it's interesting, that point. I think it's come up once or twice before, and exactly what you said. The follower thing maybe comes from producers. It's never from casting. And if it does, it's the producer side that look for that.
We don't care. Yeah.
That's financing
about followers.
Sure.
Finance or visibility based. I mean, look, if someone has 2 million followers and they make a post about the film, you're getting a lot of eyes on, that post in theory. My director, Cameron Vanoy of Flinch, who we put Tom Segura in that film, he was saying that Tom Segura's insane fan base, and look, that isn't why we cast him, but sort of a happy, default result of that is that Tom's following has been very helpful in getting eyes on the film.
Which makes sense. But to your point, talent still comes at the forefront of it. Just in case anybody's getting triggered at the moment. Who knows?
Yeah. Thank you. Yes, I want to make that very clear.
Cool. All right, let me bring in Haley, who's been waiting for a few minutes, and hopefully she's around. She is. Hey, Haley. How you doing?
Hi. Hi, Michelle. Hi, Ashley. Can you hear me? Okay?
Yeah. Welcome.
Yeah, I can hear you great.
Sweet. You should be you're all set with Zoom, Haley. Don't pretend like you don't know how this thing works.
I don't know what you're talking about.
No, I don't know. I've set you up, Michelle. Haley, have you heard of that horror film Host that was all done on Zoom last year?
Yes. Yeah, I think
It's me.
my friend edited it.
Oh, there you go.
That's so cool.
Brenna?
What?
Did you say your friend edited it?
I think so. Hold on, let me look.
I mean, Brenna.
Now I gotta look it up.
I hope that this is the same film and this is like a nice alchemical connection.
Me too.
Let me see. Oh no, it was a different one. Hold on. This is the one that Rob Savage did?
Yes.
Cool. And yeah, that's you. That's so cool. What was that like? I'm gonna ask you the question before you ask me the question.
Let's do it.
What was that like doing something like that was completely remote and whatnot?
I mean, it was weird at first. It was a little challenging, just because we, us as actors had to do everything. So, we were handling, the camera and the sound and continuity and like every little aspect. And sending the footage back to them was the most nerve-wracking thing ever. Just, you never know when you're going to lose something and have to do gold. But because the film was made by, essentially, we're all friends. So Rob is a good friend of mine. Their producer Doug is a good friend of mine. Like
that helps.
Yes. So it definitely had like a lot of collaboration in it. When things did go wrong, it wasn't like, no one's head was on the stake. It was kind of like, okay, let's figure out how we can fix this.
Right.
And even all the whole cast, we're all friends. We're all actors that have been friends for years. I
love it.
So we got to improv pretty much everything in the film is all improv dialogue.
Wow.
So yeah, it was cool. It was like once after like the first couple days of learning, it was just like, it felt like doing a play almost where you did long takes. Yeah.
That's super neat. Oh, awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for asking. Now I have questions for you.
There you go.
I'm ready. I'm ready for you.
Well, so I'm American, but I'm based in London. And I was just curious right now, because of COVID and everything that's going on, how kind of casting is working for you as far as like, international casting, or if you're
so quarantine is tricky, right? Mm-hmm. So for me, depending on the production and where it's shooting, there may be certain quarantine rules where they just literally will not accept anyone flying in from anywhere because of the quarantine rules. Not all productions are like that, because some productions are willing to pay for the quarantine time, and some are not. It also depends what you're willing to. If you're from LA, like, do you have a place to stay here? So you're at a bit of an advantage, which is a very positive thing, that you could probably be considered as an LA local hire because you would have somewhere to stay, right? And we wouldn't have to pay for accommodations. It would depend on, if you'd be willing to, if you have points, or if you'd be willing to pay for a flight. International flights are significantly more expensive. But
my best friend's a flight attendant, so I've lucked out in that department.
So I've heard of this before. That's why I was asking these questions. So you have a great advantage where I feel, are you represented? Do you have an agent at this point or no?
So I do here in London, but I don't in the US, which has been kind of this year looking to try and get representation now that.
I mean, in theory, your UK rep, if they have access to the American breakdowns, can still submit you. I deal with international reps all the time, but so from my perspective, again, TV might be a little bit different, but in terms of the indie film space, I would certainly consider you on one of my projects, being that you'd be able to fly in and sort of put yourself up for like an LA project. We don't care where you come from, as long as you have the talent and you are, you're not going to break our budget. I'd certainly consider you. I mean, again, the only thing that might be tricky about that would be the quarantine rules. But I feel like if I could tell my production, well, she would quarantine for 12 days and then COVID test and whatever, I don't see there being a problem there.
Okay.
So I think because of your situation of being from LA and having a best friend who's a flight attendant, I think you're at a great advantage that could really work for you.
Is that like, because obviously you wouldn't know that about me without having this chat. Is that, how's the best way to like be like, hey, I will come out tomorrow morning?
Typically in the breakdowns, we will denote like LA local hire or whatever, Atlanta local hire. I don't know if you have family in Atlanta. You know, so if you fill that criteria, then just submit on it. Because what we're doing is we're trusting that you know, are what we've asked for on the breakdown. And then if we select you to self-tape and you move forward to like the callback session or something like that, then we'll probably probe a little further, like, well, where exactly are you based? And again, the only thing that I think could mess that up would be a quarantine rule that, again, is out of our hands. We just have to follow it. But it seems like you could have a pretty good chance about that not being a stumbling block in the process for you.
That's really good to hear, because I really thought the opposite, that I was like, you know, now, especially with COVID, I would be stuck.
Yeah, it depends. I mean, I've listened to a few of my casting colleagues talk about TV where they're like, nope, no one from a plane, no one, like, not okay, right?
Yeah.
But for me, on my indie films that I've been working on, as long as they can adhere to the quarantine rules, my filmmakers have been pretty open.
Great. Cool. That's very good to know.
Yeah.
I have another question if I have the time. It's kind of, well, going along lines, I guess, with COVID. So because a lot of stuff here, I'm not sure if this is how LA is, we've done, you know, everything self-tapes and Zoom auditions. With a Zoom audition, do you have any advice? Just because I've done them and they feel a little weird, or like I don't know where to look, or, you know, like, is there anything?
Awful. They feel awful.
They're terrible.
I'm just gonna be honest. It's funny because some of my producers, they like it better, and I'm like, what? I unfortunately, I don't have any fantastic advice for you, because it's just so weird to be acting with a computer. Like, it doesn't matter if you're you know, I mean, the Zoom tricks, like, there are a couple of great actors who have these little like tutorials on how to help the Zoom auditioning process. Like my friend Sam Valentine, she's a great actress, and she has this Instagram site and podcast called One Broke Actress, and she gives great tips on all this kind of stuff from your side. But honestly, just do your best, stay as present as you can, sitting in your authenticity as you perform. And that's really all that you can do. You can't control the person that you're reading with on the other side of the Zoom and all that kind. Like, I wish I had a way better answer for you, but
that's fine.
I mean, it makes my job more difficult too. So it's been an adjustment for me as well. But I will say that I have had a few producers saying that they will continue to do it that way, even after in-person producer-director sessions come back. They have said that they like being able to focus on the craft and the performance, as opposed to getting seduced by someone's great personality in the room or something like that. You know what I mean?
As opposed to the fact that they don't have to fly in from wherever they really are, and that's not the reason. But the craft.
Right. So anyway, so I would say be prepared that, I mean, for me, I'm going to always fight to have in-person callbacks, you know, once it's safe and all that kind of stuff, and chemistry reads. But it's probably, there's going to be way more Zoom auditions and Zoom chemistry reads moving forward. So I don't have the right words of advice for you, other than to just keep doing great work, you know.
Perfect. I mean, that's still helpful, even just to be like, if you don't know, then we're all on the same page at least. So that not like you're totally. Like, oh, you don't know what you're doing on Zoom? Oh, well. Yeah.
No, I don't know.
We should have done that instead. So. We should have done that version. That would have been a lot better. You don't know what you're doing, really?
Do I have time for one more, or is you?
Go for it.
I'm good. If
go for it. Good. There's someone in the waiting room, but they're fine. They can wait.
Well, it's just a kind of a broad question, but is there anything actors do that you don't like pet peeves, or you're like, please don't do this?
Well, okay, I'll go. in the room, don't touch the casting director and don't touch their things. I've had my phone broken. I've had my hair pulled. I've had all kinds of things happen. So just leave the casting director and their possessions alone. That would be for in person.
Who pulled your hair?
Who broke your phone?
It's so weird.
I'm glad that you think so I don't feel like I was overreacting when I was kind of appalled.
Yeah.
But as far as self-tapes go, you know, having your sides in hand is a very tricky thing. I prefer not to be, you can have them in your hand because sometimes it's just a security blanket. Jane, my mentor, has said sometimes when the actor holds the pages in their hand, the words travel up their arm into their brain so that they just can remember it. Whereas sometimes when you don't have the pages in your hand, it's like this mental thing that gets triggered, and then all of a sudden your brain goes blank, right?
Yeah.
So it's fine to have them in your hands. But I will say, especially on a self-tape, every single time you look down at that page, it's almost impossible to not break character. I mean, sometimes you can look down, like if for some reason you definitely did forget and you just need a moment to like get back on track and you do it in character, sometimes that can work. But if you can be off book and not have those pages showing in a self-tape, it engages the casting professional a lot more. For me, at least through my experience, I'm looking so much at what is going on behind your eyes. That's the other thing, is framing. Don't be too far away. I need to see what's going on behind your eyes. I need to see your face. So sound and lighting, I need to hear you and see you. Don't be too far away. And if you can avoid having either the pages in the frame or even referring to them at all, even if they're in your hand, for me, then that really provides an environment that I can just really focus on what you're doing in terms of performance.
Great. I wouldn't dream of holding sides. I feel like that's beaten out of us here in England.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, for
it's
sure.
frowned upon here.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's all the main questions I have, and I feel like I should pass you off. But thanks so, Michelle. It was so lovely to chat with you.
Yeah, you too, Haley. Thank you.
And thanks, Ashley.
For sure. Thanks for coming on, Haley. Appreciate it.
Bye.
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 Amazing. I feel like I threw her in the deep end at the beginning there, trying to plug her film, but I felt like it was important to do it on her behalf because it was a great.
Oh no, I think it's great.
A great
because
feat.
now I'm gonna go watch it.
There you go. They did it like peak lockdown, I think April or May or something. So to do a feature film. I have two
friends that did that. So it makes me wonder how many people were actually doing that at that time.
Well, I know Jeremy Gordon did the IGTV thing because I spoke to him about it, and Jeremy did this like Zoom web series type thing on Instagram. But a feature film specifically, I think like those guys were probably one of the early ones.
Yeah, I feel like my friend Bay Darris, who's a producer, he did one, and I think they claimed to be the first. So I don't know, but it was literally like April.
Sure.
And then my other buddy, Don Money, he edited one. So there were a few going on. But anyway, it's just incredible what they were able to do, and the ingenuity and the resourcefulness is truly impressive.
I think it's just learning on the fly and pivoting into this weird thing.
Totally.
And
yep.
And when the world needed content, they were bringing something even when there was a shortage.
Yeah, it's making lemonade out of lemons, right?
Pretty much. Absolutely. Okay, let me bring in Mitch, who's the final one waiting. It's another London American, another London-based American.
I love it.
Hopefully he's still around. Before he comes in, Mitch was my acting coach way back when.
Oh, cool.
So he's from Boston originally, and he doesn't seem to want to join.
Oh no, Mitch, come in, join us.
Or is Zoom doing what Zoom does? Oh no, there we go. That was really slow. Hello, Mitch. I don't know why I waved.
Hey.
How are you?
Hey, Ash. How are you?
Good.
Hi,
to see
Mitch.
you.
How are you? Hi, Michelle. How are you?
Hi. So nice. I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm okay. I'm surviving here in the UK in our lockdown, and I haven't had a chance to really listen to this podcast, so I don't know how.
What? What?
Well, I mean, this particular podcast.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, no, that's fine. I pre-record it, so nobody gets to hear it till it comes out. So that's okay. I'll let that slide.
No, I've listened to your podcast, Ash.
Thank you. Well,
listen. So I didn't know whether I should just jump in with a question or whether
jump in. It's you. Yeah, you and Michelle have a chat.
In. I'm ready. I'm ready for you.
I'm gonna shut up. I'm gonna shut up. You guys chat.
Okay, great. Michelle, I just want to ask you, I had to write this down because I need to get grounded. is it possible for an American UK-based actor in London to get LA reps? I mean, I know in theory it's possible, but I've been trying, and I find in practicum it's not been as easy as it may seem like it could be, you know?
Yeah.
So I wanted to know your thoughts about it.
Yeah, I think it depends on the variables of your situation, meaning how just having several friends who are reps and trying to combine my lens and their lens in answering this. It would depend how accessible you are in terms of if they needed you to jump on a plane and come to LA, you know, for a job or something, like how able are you to do that? Because what I have found with the
Very
US reps,
accessible.
okay, well, that's a good thing, because the LA reps tend to
Very accessible.
want you to be able to come here on, you know, relatively short notice, especially from all the way across the pond, right? But also, I guess it would have to be based on, so I'm assuming you have a pretty good body of work, right?
I think I do.
think
Yes, I do.
It depends on kind of what they're trying to fill on their roster. So I have actually had, you know, I've sent an actor to, let's say, a rep friend of mine, and they really like them, but they already have three of those types on their roster or whatnot, right? So sometimes it really maybe isn't to do with your location in the UK. Maybe it just has to do with what their strategy is for filling out. But do you, how long have you lived there in the UK?
Well, I've lived in London for about 16 years.
Oh.
I don't have a place in Los Angeles, but I have a place I can stay in Los Angeles.
Sure.
And that goes for New York as well. I mean, I'm pretty well established there. I mean,
Yeah,
I lived in New York for many years.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like maybe you just haven't come across the right rep yet, because if you're able to, now look, COVID and quarantine protocols, it's a very weird time. Let's pretend there wasn't the pandemic. I feel like you might have had an easier time, but now some productions, especially in TV, they're saying no one from a plane. You cannot, like, I was casting something in Atlanta, and there was someone from New York, and we couldn't hire her unless she agreed to drive down from New York as opposed to fly. So that particular production was so strict,
right.
Zero plane travel whatsoever. They didn't care. No exceptions, car travel only. And I have heard, talking to a few of my casting colleagues, I've heard the same about their particular productions. For me, like, I'm casting a couple of movies. Actually, I'm so glad you're here. You could be right for something I'm casting right now. So I will look you up and say, it hit me like a light bulb. So one of the films I'm casting, it shoots in LA, and my producers, as long as the actor is willing to quarantine and whatnot, we don't care, and willing to COVID test when they come out of quarantine and all that, they're very open to having an actor from anywhere, right? So that particular production is a bit more lenient. So there you have it.
That's the first time that's happened, by the way. That's never happened on this before. So that's cool.
Yay!
We can sync all that up for sure.
Oh yeah, that'll be easy. You know, so maybe it's just the right rep hasn't synced up with you yet. I will say, is your UK representation willing to reach out to any of their US colleagues?
Well, I mean, I think in theory they are, but I find in practicum, for many reasons, a lot of it has to do even with the time change, because it's like
Sure.
It's the most opposite time change you could have.
Totally.
I don't think the UK agents are so motivated to to do that. Now I'm all unioned up and I'm all, I mean, I can just drop, I'm an American citizen, I'm SAG, I'm American, I'm everything, I can just pop in and work just like anybody else in America,
So Mitch, so what we're going to do, I'm going to have you read for this self-tape for this thing that I'm casting, and B, go ahead and send me your material, okay, like your reel, and I'm just going to take a look at it and see if, no promises, but I'm going to see if there are any open-minded US reps that I have a relationship with that you might be a good fit with. I'll just give it a think.
That's amazing.
That's so generous of you, Michelle. That's so generous. What an incredible response. I could
My
not
pleasure.
hope for anything better than that. It's amazing.
Cool.
Astonishing. I'm a little gobsmacked. I'm a little emotional actually, because I just did not expect this kind of an interaction.
Yeah, well, as I like to say, the universe is undefeated. So things like this happen when you're open to it, right? So you attracted this into your life. So congratulations.
Well, thank you very much. I will do everything you asked for, and thank you, and good luck with the rest of the session here with Ash, because he's a brilliant man.
And now, but now I'm gobsmacked and I have to talk. So I'm gonna have to pull my throat from out of somewhere inside of me and keep this thing going. Wow.
Awesome.
Amazing. I'm really glad that you came on now, Mitch.
Okay.
Now
thank you so much.
My pleasure. Great to get to know you, and we'll continue this on a different arena.
Yeah, a non-public platform.
Awesome, Michelle. Thank you so much. Bye,
See
guys.
you later, Mitch. Bye.
Bye.
That's amazing of you. That's
my pleasure. That's what we do as casting directors. We just look for opportunities.
He's great. He's a great actor. Great look. As I said,
really great look. Really great look.
He Boston born and bred, and then obviously moved around in New York, London. As I said, he was my teacher for years. I cast him in my short film 4 years ago, and he's been in loads of stuff. He's worked on lots of big projects, but I think to his point, working in the States has always been a bit of a barrier, and so let's sync it up and just see what happens.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that feels like a point where I could probably just wrap it up, but I don't want to, even though it's a nice Oprah moment. So I'm just going to use a little bit more of your time, just because I did want to talk about the sports and the basketball side, because it's something I'm super fascinated about. And what I really want to talk about first is your take on how sports and the discipline and the mindset and just that ethos translates, or for lack of a phrase, should translate into an acting and an artistic endeavor. What's your view on all of that?
Yeah, so gosh, there are so many analogies, but the one that I probably talk about the most is, like, take for example, professional players, basketball players who are the best shooters in the world. Okay, Steph Curry, let's just use him as an example. He's one of the best shooters, if not arguably the best shooter in the world, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't shoot the basketball every single day and get in 500 to 1,000 reps shooting. The way that he stays and keeps that muscle and that skill sharp is by doing it. And it's the same for acting. You can be the most talented actor, but you've got to keep the muscle strong. You've got to keep that craft sharp. So the discipline that athletes use to stay at an elite level can absolutely be applied to the practice of your craft as an actor and performer and a creative. You got to keep those creative juices flowing and keep that muscle strong, so that when you're called upon to deliver, you're able to do it.
And from the actor's side, and again, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, from the actor's side, that is things like the obvious stuff such as training, but do you also see that falling into, like I think you said earlier, do your own little self-tape challenge, or like Haley did, get together with friends and, ideally make something in person if you can, but if not, make it over Zoom. Is that sort of the self-discipline that the actor can have?
Yep, definitely. Or perhaps, with the thing with self-tape, like you're not in the room now being redirected, right? So your scene study skills have to be even sharper now. So maybe, you know, you never really needed a scene study class before, but maybe now you do to put your self-tape ahead of the rest or something. Like self-awareness, which you mentioned earlier, has a lot to do with it. And also just in terms of, you know, the athletic arena and the creative arena, it's, you know, the big picture mentality of, look, on any given day you could lose a game, right? There are last second shots, there are things that happen that are sort of out of your control, and you lose a game, right? It doesn't negate all the hard work you've done, and sometimes you get another shot at it, you get another shot at that rival, or you get, you know, you have the next game that you can perform differently or whatever. I mean, it's very similar in the creative space. Like as I mentioned, there are so many variables that go into making a casting decision. So we don't always get to hire the best audition for the role, right? That's just unfortunately the case. Sometimes there's height involved, eye color, hair color, the producer's nephew, so many different variables, right? But if you can just keep your craft strong, and every time you self-tape or audition, you're giving your best performance, I guarantee you we will remember that and want to give you more opportunities, you know? So booking the job is not the ultimate win or the ultimate W, even though I know it feels like it because you need a paycheck in order to live. But there are wins. A callback is a win. A casting director becoming a fan of yours is a win, because then we're going to want to bring you in on everything, right? So there are lots of different ways to get a W in the actor and performer creative space than just booking the role, you know? So it's kind of that big picture mentality versus the micro version of that, where it's, I really need to book this role, or I really need to book that role.
And there's nothing else, and it's only that one thing. And if we lose game 4, then there's no game 5, but there might be game 5. So sure, that makes total sense. I want to touch on one little thing that I really liked when I heard it, and it was about Kobe and how when he had the injury of his ankle, he went and started learning tap. And he learned you know the story, right? Of course. And he talked to,
yes, and Kobe's one of my
but
favorites.
The rationale behind it I thought was fascinating, and also the fact that people looked at him like he was a crazy man. But the reason being that people in tap, the way they use their feet and the strength it has is well beyond what you would need for basketball. So for him, not just was it rehab on his ankle, but giving him a new approach to the game when he came back to then do what he did on his return. That kind of thinking is so, it's not that it's outside the box, it's still within the framework, but it's not an easy access point for anybody. How do you feel people can cultivate that, or can they? Because maybe they can't. And then if so, what's the translation, do you think, maybe in the acting space, if there is any kind of tap equivalent?
Yeah, I mean, Kobe, you know, very famously has coined the phrase Mamba Mentality. And I mean, you'll see if you go through my social media, I very often tag Mamba Mentality, because I think it's such an important thing, again, across all arenas. We're not just talking about sports, we're talking about for life, professionally, personally, and whatnot. And that Mamba Mentality, for me, and how I've interpreted it, is to be able to sort of rise above whatever circumstances there are, and to think outside of what people tell you your only options are, okay? Because there is not one recipe to being a successful actor. I mean, look at what just happened with Mitch, you know, that doesn't happen all the time, but in that moment, time and space, it did. So when we are open and we have a mentality of not shutting down or adhering to the limited beliefs that perhaps go on in our head. Look, we're humans. Stories go on in here all the time. You know, you might have, you know, messed up a little audition and you think, oh my gosh, that casting director hates me, they're never going to bring me in again, all this kind of stuff. When in reality, from my end, maybe I thought, what, they had that little flub and they just kept going, and it felt so human and so real. I really love, you know, and I'm thinking about how great it was, right? So there are these constant stories in our head, and if we can just let them pass through, because they're going to be there because we're human, right? But if we understand that we just let them pass through and keep and really adhere to the broader, stronger mentality of no matter what comes your way, there is always a solution, there is always a pivot, there is always a way to look at things in a different way and help you overcome and rise above. One of my favorite quotes is, "A miracle is nothing but a change in perspective." Okay. A miracle is nothing but a change in perspective. So when our perspective can change on certain things that we have this rigid belief about, miraculous things can happen, right? And I think that is in line with, you know, the Kobe tap story and that Mamba mentality, is looking for ways that we can grow through adversity, and not let it have a permanent hindrance in our journey and our trajectory. Because honestly, look, everything unfolds exactly how it's supposed to. When we look back in our lives, even the hardest times, the darkest times, when we look back and when we've come out of those, we say, oh, I see why that needed to happen. Oh, I see how I grew from that, right? So in terms of acting, let's say there's a role that you, and this is how I have some actor friends, there's a role they really, really wanted. They were perfect for it. They nailed the audition. The casting director loved them. Da, 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 da. And for whatever reason, they didn't get it, right? And it's a really devastating thing to cope with. I had an actor friend that happened to, and then because she didn't book that, it allowed her to be available for something else that came 3 months later. That if she had booked this one thing, she would not have been available for this. And this thing was actually the role that really served her the best in her career. Right.
It's trusting that space, though, because we can only see what's here and then what the vision we have for ourselves is. So we see the gap and we see the present. We can't see stuff in the midst that we've not sort of foretold ourselves about yet. And I guess it's that weird human storytelling process that you alluded to, that we have to keep reframing, which I think is a word you've mentioned a few times today, which I think is super powerful. And also interesting how that reframe seems to always happen in those tough, adverse moments in life. I don't know what that is. Don't know what that is about the human condition that makes it be that's the case most of the time. But yeah, I think that makes total sense to I guess embrace the uncertainty, as sucky as that can be a little bit. And like with the example of your actress friend there, trusting that down the line something else will come if you just try and chill.
Right. and you know what I found empowering just in my own life, and I feel like it can be applied to our professional lives as well, is the unknown doesn't have to be a scary, fear-based place if we can look at it as unlimited opportunity and possibility. If we don't say there, you can only get there through avenue A, B, and C, and we say, oh my gosh, we have the whole alphabet, you know, way to get there, you know, viewing it as infinite possibilities and opportunities is a lot more comforting than, you know, thinking that there's only a finite way to arrive at our dreams and our goals, you know.
Sure. Otherwise we're averse to making mistakes or a failure, and then if we do make one, we think it's end of the line, which is obviously never the case. But which,
you know, going to the athletic thing, I've always said this, a confident athlete is a successful athlete, and it's the exact same thing for an actor. A confident actor is a successful actor, because if you are afraid to make a mistake, or when you make a mistake, that's all that you can focus on, it limits your performance. I watch it in my basketball players. You know, if they're afraid of making a mistake, they won't take those chances that we need them to take, like make that pass or take that open shot or whatever the case is. And with actors, if you're too afraid to perform and be creative with a choice that you feel very strongly about because you want to play it safe, because you're trying to second guess what the casting director or what the director wants, it's not going to work. You know, you have to take those chances. And look, if you are constantly trying to figure out what they want, whether that's a director, a casting director, whatever, you drive yourself nuts. This is not going to be a fun journey for you at all. You got to get really comfortable with who you are and what you have to offer and sit in that. use your power, use your truth, and then someone will come looking for that. Because my casting colleagues and I have said multiple times, sometimes we have a director that says, I don't really know what I'm looking for, but I'll know it when I see it.
Yeah.
So if you can bring your authentic self to that space, they may say, yep, that's what I want.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Easier said than done, but I think that's the work for I mean, that's not
practice,
just
right? Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not just an actor's work. It's life work. Again, that's hallmark and cliche, but I think it is kind of the truth. And whether you're a banker or an actor, you still benefit from, walking down that path. It just maybe manifests in your life differently.
Well, and even, I mean, I'll give you, I don't know how much time we have, but from a casting perspective, just for me, a few years ago, there was a project that I was working on, and we needed, it's more than a few years ago now, but anyway, a past project I was working on, and we were looking for the lead girl, and it was sort of like an 18, 19, 20-year-old-ish person. And I brought in a ton of girls, and my producers didn't like any of them, basically. Like it wasn't that they didn't like them, but it was like, no, I don't think they're it. No, I don't think they're it. The project ended up going on hold, and they kind of shelved it for a few years. And I remember feeling so insecure. I'm like, oh my God, I wasn't able to deliver what they wanted. And it was like a real crisis point in like my casting career and how I felt. Anyway, a few years later, I saw a trailer for a film that was like exactly the same premise, and it was the same project. It had just changed hands in terms of like the studio that was doing it, and it still had the two same core producers and whatnot. Anyway, so it got made with a different cast and obviously a different casting director and whatnot, and I hadn't thought about it since then, and I was like, oh yeah, I remember that. Well, I'm glad they got it made, and I was like, I feel like I saw some really great actresses on that. I'm so surprised they didn't like any of them. So this was back when we still had tangible like casting binders and whatnot. So I went and dug out the old binder from that project and started to look out the printed out literally session sheets that we had, right? So archaic. And I went down the list of the actors that I had brought in for that lead role. And I saw Emma Stone. Wow. I saw Rooney Mara. I saw Brie Larson. So like all of these fantastic, and at the time they had now since won Oscars or been nominated. And I was like, you know what? I did do my job then. I can't control what the creatives want or like or anything like that. And so that was a super important moment for me, that I know that I'm casting to the best of my ability at any given time. And all I can control is myself. I can't control my creatives. I can make suggestions or whatnot. But ultimately I knew that I had done my job to the best of my ability in that moment, and they just didn't want those particular actors. I mean, I have the same with a Jennifer Lawrence story where it came to Jennifer Lawrence, and this was before she even did, no one had seen Winter's Bone. She had shot it, but it hadn't come out yet. It's done to Jennifer Lawrence and another actress, and it went to the other actress. And it's like, but if she had done the film if we had cast her in that film, she wouldn't have been available for Hunger Games. Sure. And look at what that did, right? So everything unfolds exactly how it's supposed to. And when we can embrace that and really empower ourselves to believe it, it allows us the freedom to just do what we do best at any given moment, and the right things will come to us, and we'll get involved in the projects that will serve us best,
Just got to trust the process.
Yeah, totally.
Amazing. I like to wrap these up with 10 questions that I've stolen, just straight up saying I stole them from inside the actor's studio. Okay. So if you're happy to play along, let's quick fire go through them and just see what comes to mind with the responses. So the first one,
okay,
there you go, on the hot seat. The first one is, what is your favorite word?
Oof. Ooh, my favorite word is gratitude.
What is your least favorite word?
I have those. Hold on. My least favorite word. My least favorite word is hate. Okay.
What turns you on creatively, spiritually?
Probably when I sit in gratitude, when I allow myself the space to get in a really grateful, appreciative place, all of my creativity just opens right up.
What turns you off? The converse of that, or?
Let me think. What terms of creative? Overthinking and self-doubt.
Next one's optional because not everybody likes to swear, but it is, what is your favorite swear word? So
I've got my kids in the room, so I'm going to choose.
I'm going to opt out. Opt out.
I'm going to opt out.
Email me later and I'll do a voiceover on that one. The next is, what is your favorite sound?
Oh, my kids' laughter.
Because they're in the room, you have to say that. What's your least favorite sound?
Like the big trucks outside that when they're reversing go like I can't stand that sound. It feels like they're reversing forever. Yeah.
Into your house or something as well, right?
Yeah.
Final few. The next one is, what job or profession other than your own or the ones you have done or do, because there's many, would you most like to attempt?
So
I'm ruling out basketball coach because you kind of sort of do it. I know that's like an easy
right.
go-to. You were going to go to it. I can
it would probably be a sort of like a mentor consultant. Okay. Meaning whether it's traveling to teams or to businesses or whatnot to help expand sort of the mental, emotional strength of a particular unit, whether that be within a business, whether that be within a sports program. I would just love, I've been fortunate enough to gather some really valuable information over the years that I love to share with people. So it would probably be helping out different organizations with that.
Do you feel like there's sort of different age groups that you resonate with differently or more? I mean, obviously, I guess corporations and a certain demo is different to, say, teens.
You know what? Probably I really love the young people, the teens, you know. I was very fortunate to have an amazing coach in my formative years of, 14 to 18. Some great examples, some great mentors, and it's such an important time in your life, especially because so much change is going to happen in your 20s, that depending on what foundation you have as a teen, it will help you to cope and navigate that. And so that's probably specifically why I coach high school, is because beyond basketball, I love to be a mentor to the young people and to give back, because I was mentored so beautifully and it served me so well as to who the human I am today is, that I want to be able to help and support and encourage in whatever way I can in that age group. So I do have a special place in my heart for the teens, I would say.
That's amazing. I think you're right. It's so important. I mean, at any age, but especially in that kind of crunky area where you're late teens, early 20s, and you're trying to figure stuff out, to have the right guide to help you sort of navigate.
Tools, I really try and teach the tools that will serve my players, again, well beyond basketball.
And I guess, do you find it's more difficult now with online media and all the distractions of like social channels and different voices?
Oh yes. I think about back, when I was I'm so grateful that there was no social media in existence when I was in high school. That would have been a nightmare. And I do look, especially right now, I coach both boys and girls in terms of athletes, but right now specifically I coach girls, and to see the mental and emotional toll it can take on them, the expectation of how they should look on social media or whatnot, oh gosh, does it break my heart. And I talk about it a lot in our sessions and when we get together, because it is such it is unfortunately can be a very negative, toxic, destructive place for teens with social media and whatnot.
For sure. What job would you never want to attempt? Working in social media, clearly by the sounds of it, might be one of them.
Yeah, I would never want to be an actor. And maybe that's why I have so much compassion. No. But I mean it in a positive way. Like, what you are called upon to do as an actor is so amazing and so difficult that I admire. Like, again, that's why anyone that has come into the room for me knows it's a very warm room and I want the best for you. It's because I know that what you're doing is so tough and so draining, and you're giving all of yourself, like yourself as a human, not just as a performer, that I know that I could not ever do it. I don't have the talent for it, first of all, but I just couldn't do what is required emotionally and mentally. So I have such admiration for actors. I mean, as I say this a lot, you know, I feel like I'm a teammate with actors. Like, if it weren't for actors, I wouldn't have a career. So I feel like it's a very synergistic thing. And that's why I love to support actors so much, because I understand that what you do is so tough. I could never do it. I could never do it.
I mean, I think the synergistic part crosses the board with everything, and we could say that about all the different moving parts too. But yeah, sure, without actors, there's no casting, but without, you know, casting is very difficult for actors as well. So it is, you know, a multifaceted.
Yeah, we're
jigsaw.
Teammates.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
Total teammates.
Final question, a little bit more ethereal one. It's, when it's all said and done, what would you like the story of your life to be? What kind of legacy do you want to leave?
You know, I would just love to be remembered as a person who was passionate about life and who was kind. Passion and kindness are two very important qualities to me. I really try and live a life authentic to those two things. So if I could be remembered as that by my family, friends, and whoever comes in contact with me, it would be the ultimate honor.
Well, I think we've seen a bucket load of passion and kindness today from you, just with,
thank you.
You know, the whole conversation with me, and the kindness for your time and what you've shared, and with Mitch. And so, you know, I think that's pretty self-evident, but I think it's just clearly a part of who you are, as opposed to something that you're doing. So it's
thank you.
It's going to come out in the end in the wash, no doubt. Look, final moment to you, I guess. Any kind of lasting remarks, closing comments that you want to button this off with? What's the main takeaway, if there were to be one, from your side for anyone listening or watching?
Yeah, just, you know, when performing, when being creative, when, you know, being in your craft, just trust yourself, trust being in that authentic, vulnerable space. And, you know, that's going to serve you the best. You know, so that's really, it sounds so simple, but, you know, the overthinking, the self-doubt, that's just going to keep you further and further away of what you're trying to achieve. So the better you can get. Look, we're all human. You're going to have good days and bad days. A great quote, I know I give a lot of quotes, but it's sort of how I remind myself of things. You know, all we can do is be our best in any given moment, right? So each day we can give 100%. Well, some days our 100% is going to look awesome and like a rock star, and it's like, yeah. And then some days our 100% is going to look like, well, I kept myself alive. That's a good thing. Like, your 100% is going to look different on any given day, but as long as you're just doing your best, that's all anyone can ask for. So when you're self-taping, when you're auditioning, when you're just going through life as a human, when you can just give your 100% and not judge what it looks like and just stay in your power and your truth, I feel like your journey in this crazy business will actually be one that serves you and can be really fun.